Hey there, Alice. Welcome to Wonderland. You ready to tumble down that rabbit hole of political polarization? Hopefully, I can shed some much needed light on the subject. Maybe you're curious about it, maybe you're not, but either way, it should be entertaining. So, the story really begins with World War II. Just to go over it really quickly, it looks like a lot of the conservatives, if you will, actually, no, they were fascists. A lot of them actually still held political positions in government after World War II in Germany. And the youth, the kids who were going to school, who were going to college, well, they didn't want to grow up in a regime that had been the reason for why Germany was in such turmoil. So they pushed for more liberal, educations, and they had riots in the streets, and they even supported communism in a big way. I'm sure, and if you don't know about it, well, you should look up East Germany, because the east of Berlin, as well as a big portion of East Germany, was its own country called the DDR, and they were a communist regime. So they were pushing for these leftist ideas to try to get as far away as possible from fascism, and that's understandable. However, as with a lot of things in life, there's a sort of pendulum swing, and we went from that extreme, which was fascism, to another extreme, which is ultimately, I'm going to argue here, another form of fascism. It's the same thing, right? When you, uh, let's say, suppress free speech and freedom of thought, it's a fascist idea. And just because leftism, traditionally speaking, stands for liberal rights, it doesn't necessarily mean that they acquire or push for liberal rights in the right ways. Sometimes they can get extreme as well, and they become just as fascist as people on the right side of the spectrum who are more conservative. So, big reason for why I'm talking about World War II is that over time, especially if you look, from the end of the war in 45, all the way through the communist regimes for the next 40, 50 years, we're looking at a lot of people in education who were liberal, far left leaning, more so, and it became a trend. So, and specifically, the professors that would enter universities, they usually occupy the humanities sections. So we're talking about, psychology, we're talking about gender studies, that sort of thing. Um, so the main reason for why there would be, or one of the reasons for why there's political polarization is because of education. And if you have mostly left-leaning professors teaching the younger generations, what do you think is going to happen? Well, a lot of that political ideology gets transmitted to the students. Those students leave the universities and the colleges, and they end up being, leftist minded, leftist culture, and they enter their sort of jobs, whatever they had studied in the sciences, technology, and arts, and all that kind of stuff, and they influence the political sort of ideology in their own respective domains as well. So this has been happening since the World War II. It's just been this growth of leftist politics really taking over the education sector. That educational sector, breeds more and more students who are also like-minded, and then you have a bit of an unequal balance between left and right ideologies. Pretty simple and straightforward to understand, right? That's the very first thing when it comes to World War II. The second would be the philosophical revolutions of the 60s as well. So we're talking about Simone de Beauvoir, Jean-Paul Sartre, Michel Foucault, Jacques Derrida. They had a big instrumentation they were, yeah, that makes sense. They were instrumental. Yeah, they were instrumental in this sort of push for, communism and leftism as well, with their ideas. They brought a lot of good ideas to the table as well, but that's needless to say, they also had support for the political ideology. It wasn't just philosophical. Jean-Paul Sartre was quite famous for supporting communism, even in the face of what was happening in the communist regimes. Stalin and Mao Zedong killing a lot of people for reasons that Jean-Paul Sartre otherwise disagreed with. So that's, thing number two, number zwei, that would push the world a little bit more on that leftist scale, right? And then we have technology as well. Actually, before we go to technology, let's continue with education. But this kind of education is not really the one that you're thinking about. This is a different kind of education. It's called ideological subversion. So I'm kind of getting through this very quickly just to give you a bit of a rough picture with the education thing, because we have a lot to cover. But ideological subversion is when you're being educated but against your will, and I don't know if that's relevant because you don't even know what's happening. But if you were to know that it was happening, it would be against your will, most likely. Usually you don't like people digging around in your psyche or dictating what it is that you're going to believe. But people do it all the time. And in fact, it's unavoidable. Every single person is impacted by ideological subversion. It's just that what actually happened after World War II and with the Soviet regime is that they did it intentionally, and it was on a lot more narrow of a scale, right? I mean, if you grew up in a culture, if you're born, let's say in, I don't know, Japan, right? Chances are you're going to be into Buddhism or Shintoism or Taoism, one of those religions, one of those ideologies that you're going to carry around just because it's cultural, right? I mean, you're going to have that ideology. But if a political system somewhere decides to educate you and like brainwash you to get their way specifically, then you're really not going to want that, regardless of even if you agreed with their sort of ideology. It's not something that you would appreciate, right? So that ideological subversion is something that is actually better described by a member of or an ex-member of the KGB. I think he's dead now, but he was a famous whistleblower, and he was actually in charge of the propaganda sort of section of the KGB. And what he talks about briefly is about how he was in charge of inundating, just flooding the states and the West with propaganda, so that people were, more inclined to start going a little bit more leftist, go a little bit more liberal, right? So I'm just going to pull up a video here that is very, very interesting, and we're going to listen to him together here. His name was Yuri Bezmenev, and here we go.
But what we did when I was working for Novosti Press, we would snow plow editorial offices, student organizations, religious groups with literature of class struggle. If not directly Marxism-Leninist propaganda, then a propaganda of illegitimate aspirations of working class, betterment of life, equality. Mind you, President Kennedy once said, we will make America to believe that people are born equal. Are people born equal? Is there any mentioning in the Bible or any other holy scripture in any religion, if you don't believe me, go to the library and check it, there is not a single word about equality, just the opposite. By your deeds, God will judge you. What you do is important, the merit of your personality. You cannot legislate equality. If you want to be equal, you have to be equal. You have to deserve it. And yet...
Okay, so I just want to make a quick side note here. A lot of people are going to be like, yeah, but religion is, bad anyway. Well, first off, I wouldn't be surprised if you were to sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? If you were to if you were to negate what he's saying about religion, I'm not surprised because, first off, leftism really usually goes hand in hand with atheism. But his point isn't that, you know, we should follow what religion says about equality. What he's saying is there isn't a single culture or, you know, religious, you know, model that really talks about equality in the way that leftists do today. And he uses religion because it's the biggest identitarian group that includes, you know, people that in a way that transcends race and borders and whatever, you know. So that is the best way that he can demonstrate how the idea of equality seems to have been shifted in a major way, because we never used to believe in equality the way we do today. And now all of a sudden we do. In the last 100 years, we have this idea that we should have equal outcome, regardless of, you know, whether you deserve it or not. You know, oh, well, you're white and male, so you're at the bottom of the scale because of the patriarchy, and you guys have been in charge for a very long time. Therefore, you deserve less, you know, and then you classify that way. So this is a relatively new idea, and that's what his point is. Not that we should just follow religion again. All right, so let's continue.
That we build our society on the principle of equality. We say people are equal. We know it is false. It's a lie. Some people are tall and stupid. Others are short, bold, and clever. If we make them equal by force, if we put the principle of equality in the basis of our socio-political structure, it's the same thing as building a house on sand. Sooner or later, it will collapse, and that's exactly what happens. And we, as Soviet propaganda makers, are trying to push you in the direction which you go yourself. Equality, yes, equality. People are equal. Land of equal opportunities. Is it true or not? Think about it. Equal opportunities. Should there be equal opportunities? For me, and for a lazy bastard who comes here from some other country and immediately registers as a welfare recipient benefit. I never received a single dollar. No, sorry, I did receive once. But I never applied for welfare. For the 13 years, I took any job. Security guard, journalist, taxi driver, anything. Well, I was restless, but some people don't like it. They immediately. So why should we have equal opportunity? Why?
The equal opportunity to excel.
Equal opportunity in equal circumstances, yes, but you know, people are different. To excel, yes, provided we reach the same level of excellency, perfection, which is hypothetical, distant future. Yes, maybe, but we know perfectly well that even with the best intentions, people could not be equal. Why should we have equality in the say, legal system? Myself, I'm considering myself a law-abiding citizen, and a person who comes here to rob and shoot, say, the United States administration under Carter imported thousands of Cuban criminals. They were non-criminals, yet they were accepted. Do you think it's fair if myself and my wife from Philippines, who work like a, horse as a lab technician in a hospital, should have the same rights as a criminal from Cuba? Why? And yet we repeat as parents, equality, equality, equality. And the Soviet propaganda system helps us to believe that equality is something which is desirable. Democracy, as it was established by fathers of this country, of this system in the last century, is not equality. Is the system where different people, unequal people, have a chance to survive and help each other in constant competition, in constant perfection, not an equality which is superimposed from a godfather or a nice person in Washington, D.C. And the absolute equality exists in Soviet Union, quote unquote equality. Everybody is equal in dirt, except some people are more equal than the others in Politburo.
All right, so you can see the guy's pretty intelligent, but also he was a perpetrator of this thing that we're actually talking about. So, you know, ideological subversion, again, that's part of the education sort of, so that's another weight on the scale for the leftist side, right? Is we naturally have a pendulum swing going back the other way. We've dealt with the right, conservative, fascist, kind of blah, blah, blah. Let's go more towards the left, so that's already there. But then we have a nice little push with the communists who are like, yeah, definitely, let's go this way. Because equality and class struggle, and of course, a lot of people were poor after World War II. So if they're like, oh, you know, there's class struggle here, it's unequal, let's go for equality here. It's very easy to persuade people because you're really touching at the heart of their day-to-day lives. So that's the subversion of Soviet KGB type thing. And he didn't, so there's a long actually format. You can hear him speak here for a couple of hours, very interesting. Just to mention it real quick, there's 4 stages of ideological subversion that they have developed. One is demoralization. Number 2 is destabilization, which is the propaganda that comes in. And then there's another one, which I think is invasion. That's where they actually strike. And then there's normalization. That's when they start normalizing the culture. And that's usually when you find yourself in a communist state. So that process actually takes, I think something like the entire process would take around 40, 50 years. Okay, it takes that long, for about 40 years. So it's no wonder why it's really today that we're starting to see the effects of that. It's been around that time. So just because the Cold War ended in the 90s and it's been a while, it doesn't mean that the effects of that ideological subversion isn't actually still manifesting itself. It is, very clearly. So that's number 2. Then we have the redefinition of terms. So what happens when you have a sort of extreme political polarization is that people start to play with the definition of words that we used to agree on, and now we sort of run towards redefining these terms so that we can gain some political power. So if I say, yeah, no, I believe that, you know, we should keep our borders strong, we shouldn't allow in any immigrants, then right away you're, you know, a racist and you're, you know, hate speech, that's a racist thing. When in fact it's just a conservative value, right? So again, that's a redefinition of terms. And that's part of education, because people sort of educate each other as well, don't they? If they say, you know what, here's why that's a racist thing to say or to do or to believe in, then you're stuck in this sort of like education of your peers, okay? So that's a very, very big force to really give yourself some weight here when you're on the left side. Then we have technology, okay, echo chambers. But before we go to that, maybe I can show you guys another video real quick, which would be political indoctrination. So just to give you guys some proof as to this manifesting today, where I grew up in Ontario, Canada, they have a curriculum that's literally, it's called a social justice curriculum. It's got social justice in it anyway. And I know some people might look at these guys as, you know, real big white male devil conservatives, you know, because this is Dr. Peterson and Ben Shapiro, and these guys are quite conservative. Just for anybody who might be curious who doesn't know me, I'm actually a leftist. I mean, I don't know if I could say that now, but I've definitely traditionally been left. My economic policies are quite left as well, kind of socialism. But culturally speaking, and when it comes to liberal values, I still stand straight in the middle. I'm more of a centrist now. But and so I don't agree with these guys fully on everything, but this is a good one. This is important.
You both can answer this, but it's directed to you, Jordan. Any follow-up on your call earlier this month for students to stand up and leave the classroom whenever the teacher mentions equity, diversity, and justice? And I know this is something you've talked about a bit, about how you deal with college professors.
Yeah, this was for junior high and high school kids to talk to their parents about. Well, I was trying to provide people with easy markers to note that their children are being indoctrinated, not educated. I said, well, if they talk about equity, diversity, inclusivity, white privilege, or gender, it's time to leave the class. And now that didn't cause nearly as much trouble, that video, as I thought it might.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty dangerous idea to be telling that.
Yes, but it's also dangerous not to tell them that. And I mean, it's particularly germane in Ontario, where the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario has explicitly developed a social justice curriculum with that name, whose explicit purpose is to transform kids from kindergarten to grade 8 into social justice activists. They've even bent a selection of literature to promote that. So they're perverting art for ideology. And that's the official policy of the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario. If they're going to do that, play that game, then for me to say, look, here's 5 phrases that are pretty decently diagnostic. You can be pretty certain that if these topics come up in your class, that you're now into indoctrination territory. Yeah, I think people should walk.
What's the risk, though, of saying that to a kid that may come home and the parents may not even understand these issues enough to defend them?
Risk everywhere, Ben. It's the risk of going along with it. There's a risk of standing up against it. And I believe, and that's why I've been doing what I've been doing, is that I believe that the risk of stating that this is dangerous and should stop is way less than the risk of going along with it.
I'm with you. All right, so this is going to be...
All right, so just for you guys to know that guy in the center, that's Rubin, and he's actually a gay Jewish, used to be a leftist, now he's libertarian. And there he is sitting with a conservative Christian, psychologist from Canada. And so there is something called an intellectual dark web movement. If you want to look into it, go for it. People are actually coming together and talking regardless of this polarization. There is some sort of snap back to the center. People who are saying, well, hey, look, I am on this side, but I don't know about what you guys are talking about, and I don't agree. So, people are going back to the center to talk to the other side and try to figure out what the hell is happening, right? So shout out to Rubin and all of these guys. This is not all the information I'm giving you. It's not just coming out of nowhere, right? I mean, I learned from these guys, and I'm just sort of resuming everything in one video. So that's education so far, and indoctrination and subversion. Now we got to talk about technology. So you're watching me on a piece of technology, right? I mean, it's either your laptop, tablet, or phone. And whatever happens with those devices is definitely going to be negative, because you're talking about a lot of information, right? It's the ability to access information anytime and any kind of information and all the time, right, with ease. So you're being flooded with information. And that is definitely a bad thing because of, well, it's a good thing for many reasons. But when it comes to politics, it's a very bad thing, because now the tactic of anybody who wants to have power is not to try to persuade people, but it's to try to confuse people. So if I give you a shit ton of information and you don't know what is true, what is not true, then it's a lot easier to say push you in a certain direction amongst all the confusion. And that's why technology plays a big role in the politics these days. So that's one that you, I guess, probably know of, the whole fake news thing. The second one is content algorithms. That's another one you might know of, but have maybe never thought about why it could be a good reason for the polarization happening. Well, if you look at Facebook, well, they bought Instagram, right? Then you look at Google, they bought YouTube. So this kind of integration, it happens for a reason. It's not out of nowhere. you've noticed when you kind of go on Google and you search for something, and then you go over to Facebook, and all of a sudden the product that you were looking for happens to pop up in the advertisements on Facebook, right? Or on YouTube or whatever it is. It's all interconnected now, that kind of thing. Well, I mean, that's seen as a good thing, right? Because then you know, the information comes to you. It's what you want comes to you. So whatever you input in your databases, you get the output. It just comes out and across different platforms. So it's very convenient, sure, right? That's great. But it also creates something called an echo chamber, right? I'm sure you've heard this term thrown around. So if I go on Facebook right now and I go to my wall, oop, I got some private conversations here maybe. You're just seeing me talk to my dorky friends, artificial intelligence and blah, 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 blah. Okay, cool. Anyway, can't get to it right now. But if I were to go on my wall, even what my friends post, okay, will show up in the sense that, of course, my friends' posts are going to show up, but the friends' posts that I would prefer to see would show up over what I would prefer not to see. That's the way the algorithms work, is they bring you what you want to see, because then you'll interact more and you'll use the platform more. But that's not necessarily exactly what you think it means, because what you want is something that you need to define here. Do you want to see something that confirms your bias, or do you want to see something that's going to make you angry because that's what you're trying to fight for? Now, these algorithms, they have ways of picking and choosing when and where that they can switch it up, right? Which one brings more activity to that platform. So it's not always going to bring you people that agree with you and that support the political and social values that you support. Although when it does do that, it just confirms your biases, and then you're not very used to seeing the other side of the argument. And then when you do hear it after, and it's been a long time since you've heard an opposing view, it feels like that view is very extreme. And so you're going to get up and you're not even going to want to discuss it or debate it. And that's one of the reasons for why we're polarizing. People don't want to talk to each other because that's happened. But the opposite is true, is the algorithms will bring you things that you're most likely to get angry about, especially after this period of time where it's just brought you what you want to know and what you like. You know, it's going to immediately switch it up on you and then just bring you shit that you don't want to hear, because it's just this big wave. So it goes back and forth between the two. So maybe you didn't know that, but that's the way it works. Then we have cyber terrorism and doxing or harassment, which comes as a result of that process online, right? Which is pretty clear. If people don't know what doxing is, that's literally someone online will find what you're at, will find out where you live somehow. It could be your address or even just your neighborhood or where you work or something like that, so that whoever wants to do something about that information can go ahead and do it. You know, the Twitter mobs, that kind of stuff. That's just a result of the political polarization. So there you go. We've got education. We've got the fuel on the fire of that education, pushing everybody to one side of the political spectrum, which is technology. And that brings us to the last sort of kind of, let's say, nail in the coffin, which is globalization. Now, if technology is kind of like, you know, adding fuel to the fire, well, globalization just makes that irrelevant and just blows up a nuke, because it really makes things a lot worse. So how can we get into this real quick? Let's see. Do I have any videos supporting that? I do. I have Bertrand Russell. I'm not going to describe who this guy was, although you should go and look into it. He's a big reason for why you believe certain things that you believe. But here's what he has to say about what we should do, and it's relevant to political correctness, because today we don't tolerate other people's ideas, and that comes from political correctness, unfortunately. And in a world where we're starting to globalize and become more integrated, we need that more now than ever. And back in his day, even back in his day, he saw this need, and it was an integration for him. I don't think he could have dreamed how much closer and how much integrated we would have gotten today. So imagine if that was his message back then. It's one we really need to hear right now. So let's hear it.
The moral thing I should wish to say to them is very simple. I should say, love is wise, hatred is foolish. In this world, which is getting more and more closely interconnected, we have to learn to tolerate each other. We have to learn to put up with the fact that some people say things we don't like. We can only live together in that way. But if we are to live together and not die together, we must learn a kind of charity and a kind of tolerance, which is absolutely vital to the continuation of human life on this planet.
See, so it's literally an existential threat to not be able to talk to each other, right? So that's a serious message right there. So to continue on in the same note as what Sir Russell has started us off on, we should talk about foreign investments. So we're interconnected, right? One of the reasons for that is foreign investments. People want to live in other places. They want to make money out of different markets around the world, and that can cause some problems. I'll give you a small example. But in many places on the planet, there's something called gentrification. Not to patronize anybody, but if you don't happen to know what this term means, it's literally the process of pushing people out indirectly based on some kind of marker. So the marker would be wealth, right? So if you're rich, you'll be able to live in certain areas in those cities. And if you're poor, you're going to have to move out and move further away eventually until you're outside of the city. And in Vancouver, this is a very real case that you can see for yourself clearly. It's gentrification at its most beautiful because it's literally just millionaires almost, people that live in the city of Vancouver. There's barely any middle class there. And the reason for that is because they have had to move further and further away because of the rents going up. Now, why did they go up? Foreign investment. So on the one hand, it's good to have foreign investment because it's good for the overall economy of the province or region or city. We had a lot of Asian investors come in, they buy condos and apartments, but to them, because it's just an investment, they don't actually take the time or the pain to rent out those condos or those apartments or those houses, because they know in 3 to 5 years they can just flip it and make like a 10 to 15% profit margin. That's all great, but the people who do rent out their properties, well, they see that there's a scarcity. There's not enough apartments and a lot of people moving into the city. And the reason why there aren't enough available apartments and properties is because, again, these people are buying these buildings and not renting them out. So that makes them up their own price. It's like, well, hey, shit, people are really looking for apartments. I can raise the rent another $300, until you literally see students and just regular working folk paying $1,200 to live in a closet, literally, or like a sunroom in Vancouver. I did it myself. That being said, you can see the potential for why there would be some chaos there. Globalization in this sense when it comes to foreign investments. And that's just one example. There's other ways that foreign investments and that kind of thing can cause some issues, but it can harbor some bad feelings towards other people, right? I mean, you could totally see why there'd be racism against the Koreans and the Chinese that would be investing in Vancouver. And this happens all around the world, right? So people get angry. People get angry because the globalization process is really, really intense. It causes a lot of complications and problems for a lot of people. One of them would be what you see down here, which is outsourcing and importing. So obviously, if you're looking for work, you're just fresh out of school, and then boom, uh, that job that you were going to go for got outsourced to another country, you're going to be kind of pissed off. And then the products that you would have been making, well, that gets imported, and you have to pay a tax on that on top of that, and you get even more pissed off. And that's been happening largely since the 70s. Cultural clashes, that's really a result of all that stuff, so we kind of covered that. So where are we if we kind of recap? We have education, we have technology, and we have the process of globalization. This is why we've polarized, okay? And you might be wondering right now, you might be saying, well, you know, James, you've talked about, you know, I'm going to stop my screen here. Actually, no, I'm going to need actually. You might ask yourselves, like, well, dude, you've been talking about the left, the left, the left. You know, it's just another weight on the left, another weight on the left, another weight on the left. You know, you're starting to look like pretty far right, and you're kind of like, you know, I haven't really talked about them that much, have I? But I will right now. Is it any wonder? Is it any wonder that if you put more and more people, more kind of like emphasis on one side of the political spectrum, is it any wonder that whoever naturally falls on the other side, whoever has the values of the other side, is it any wonder that they're going to radicalize? You know, so everything that I've said in this video is true. And when I say that, you know, everything is really just because of this heaviness of leftist politics, it doesn't mean that the polarization that's happening is just because of the left. No, there is radicalism on the right. There's you know, a return to bad ideas on the right as well. You know, white supremacy, neo-Nazis, blah, blah, blah. Very true. And I'm not saying that it's the left side's fault that this is happening. What I'm saying is it's due to education, it's due to globalization and technology. All right. So at the end of the day, we shouldn't look at things in terms of blame. We should look at things in terms of how do they work, how do they function, and how can we come together to fix it, no matter where you stand on the political spectrum. Problem is, you can't really do that unless you're able to talk to other people. And we can't really do that nowadays because of political correctness. And here's where I would play the blame game. Or I wouldn't even say the blame game. I'm just going to say that it's up to the left, right? In terms of the responsibility, it's up to the left to open themselves up. Okay, I'm a socialist to the point where I believe that we should socialize public transportation and internet. I think the internet should be part of the tax system. We should pay our taxes so that internet is free and fast everywhere. Okay, same thing with public transportation. All right, I'm on the left in a big degree, you know, when it comes to the economics of it, and yet my values, right? Some of them are more towards the right, and that's fine. That they're compatible. There's no reason for why I should fall into this leftist category just because my economic, you know, policies or values are more left leaning. You know, do I believe in abortion? You know, yes, I believe, you know, women should have the right to abortion, but I'm very strict on that. I mean, I would keep that right very limited, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? So you can see how, one, not everybody has to fall into a category. Two, that if you do fall into a category, even if you're, you know, straight up on the left or straight up on the right, it's your responsibility to open up and talk to other people on purpose. Try to look for the information that's contrarian to yours, because like I said, there's echo chambers, right? So that's a big one, you know, free speech. That is the one thing that the left and the right used to share in this democratic world of ours. And we don't share that anymore. Speech isn't free. And, you know, the whole catch to the free speech problem always comes down to the fact that we've redefined these terms. So some people say, yeah, I'm up for free speech, but I'm not up for hate speech. I'm not up for sedition of violence. I'm not up for blah, 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 blah. You know what? Unfortunately for you, the truth, in my opinion, all right, is that you should defend people's hate speech even, okay? Uh, and one of the reasons for that is because you need to be able to identify who those people are. If you're just suppressing thought and speech, especially the dangerous thought and speech, then you're radicalizing it, right? You're forcing those people to go underground. And then what's going to happen, right? And this is an idea that I took from Christopher Hitchens, very smart guy. So that's just one of the reasons why you should protect free speech. And there's others, but this video has been quite long. I think I want to leave you guys with a Rick and Morty little video that we're going to watch here to cap it all off when it comes to political correctness. And then you'll understand why I'm so passionate about free speech.
I think the word has just become a symbolic issue for powerful groups that feel like they're doing the right.
All right, there you go.
Does evil exist? And if so, can one detect and measure it? Rhetorical question, Morty. The answer is yes, you just have to be a genius. Cute. Your sister's boss gave me a microscope that would have made me retarded. Oh boy, Rick. I don't think you're allowed to say that word, you know? Morty, I'm not disparaging the differently abled. I'm stating the fact that if I had used this microscope, it would have made me mentally retarded. Okay, yeah, but I don't think it's about logic, Rick. I think the word has just become a symbolic issue for powerful groups that feel like they're doing the right thing. Well, that's retarded.
Rick. You're just too much genius for me. All right, guys, I hope you liked it. If there's any questions or comments, I would like to hear them. I'm not a very popular guy on YouTube because I don't really give a shit about marketing, but hey, if this has impacted one person's life, then so be it. I think it will have been worth it for me to put in the effort in this video. All right, until next time. Peace.